So I'm sure those presentations will lead to a lot of questions. Certainly one never thinks that there's 100 pieces of information about a door. I can see why FM practitioners would not be interested in most of that information. It wouldn't be of any interest, I think. But I can see equally why it would be of interest to a contractor, or constructor, or a designer. So, have we any questions for the speakers and for the both sets of speakers, from Kieran, from Venda, or from Reid? Do I see any speakers? Yeah, one here. There is a microphone, I think it's coming around to you.
Good morning, this is a question for Reid.
If you could just get your name, please.
Sorry, Ralph Montague from Architects. Having gone through the pilot project, I was just wondering, it was very interesting what you're saying, BIM is not for just new builds, but for existing buildings. And at what point do you think it would make sense for 90% of the buildings out there that are existing, that will still be around for the next 30 years, to unlock all that information that's buried in storerooms and paper boxes, boxes of paper? At what point would it make sense to convert that information into useful digital data?
Sure, it is a good question, and I think there's some. It's probably a question of what's economically viable, and that might vary from one building to another. The situation we're in is we have the same pressure on us to be performing efficiently in our PFI projects, and those tend to be long-term projects. So we know we've got those contracts for often 25 years when it's a new build. For some of the projects I'm talking about just now, 24 years to go, or about 18 to go. So we can see a long game, and that makes it worth our while to start to consider at this stage the benefit of BIM Back to the Future. I think what I've seen happening in the UK, some refurbishment projects have actually become enablers, if you like, to introduce the point cloud survey first of all. So there's a 3D image created, and it's not very rich. It's not got any asset data in it, but it's a very good, very accurate 3D representation, and that's quite quick to do. From that, some refurbishment projects are then putting in proper Revit data, asset-rich data into the building on the existing services and those things that they're changing. From that, that's maybe another way in from a project. You can suddenly benefit and maintain that data going forward. So that might be, if you like, a step into the BIM. On the back of a refurbishment type project or a new fit out type project. And ultimately, I suppose as well, you have to, for the economics of it, you have to see the benefits. And it may be that some occupiers and building owners, for the same reasons that we were talking about earlier, there might be a bit of a discontinuity there in some buildings. But if people are confident of the benefits, and hopefully we'll be able to promote some of the benefits from Project Robin, then I do see it as something that will happen in the fullness of time.
Any other questions there?
Yeah.
Alan?
Sorry, Alan over here, CITA. Obviously, BAM have made a conscious decision to work with Autodesk and Revit. Of course, there's many other vendors in the industry there. I wonder, are there any other users of other BIM technologies here, and are they aware of what innovations are taking place in the whole FM side of things?
That's a question for the audience.
Yes, yeah.
I see people hanging around there looking sheepish. I'm not sure we're going to get an answer to that, are we? Nobody else wants to volunteer? Yeah.
And has any agreement been reached between the vendors and the vendor community, we'll say, in regard to the adoption of COBE Plus?
Just a quick comment on this. Werner Portman working on a pilot project, and we're using a different package like Microsoft ArchiCAD systems, and they just released a latest BIMX Docs iPad application where you can link 2D data to your 3D model So now we're looking to implement FM, systems for our domestic clients, slightly bigger clients as well. Maybe not to the full detail of what you guys are doing at the moment, but we see this as a very important evolution, that it's portable, technology that actually clients can access easily as well. So we always welcome all these new, technologies coming on stream, and we are very happy to demonstrate it, later on today as well.
Any other questions there? Yeah, we have a question over there in the corner and one to follow here, label number 2.
Sorry, Michal King. Just to read again, the second slide that you put up there with regards to objectives for collaboration of BIM data transfer, you had pulled forward the FM contractor, the main contractor and everything back into the feasibility of the project line. In that, there is a direct cost increase to the upfront capex for the client, and that is probably the hardest sell, to go bring all of that cost forward, spend it up front, and you'll be able to operate your building. For clients themselves, no different than the owner-occupier or the lease-occupier example you gave, is different departments within an actual client will not want to spend that. Like the attitude is towards, I'll keep my budget low, right, and then operations can carry the costs, and it's probably similar within Vodafone. They have numerous different internal departments, and energy just happens to be one of them that would take on board this. But any of the CapEx Vodafone projects would probably go, no, cut our costs. It's all laid back to the actual cost of bringing that information up and into the feasibility side of things. Is there a plan for that model that you put up with regards to controlling those costs, or how that would be sold?
Sure.
Very interesting question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and it's a situation that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. I think that the slide was rather utopian, and I accept that. It's certainly possible in some circumstances, and I've probably got 3 examples I can think of which cover a number of bases, but I think I recognise the issue, and it's a fact. So first of all, I acknowledge that. The PFI scenarios are very much one where contractors have to embrace that collaboration from the first phase, because it's a procurement of services within the new construction or refurbishment construction. So that's an easy one to put a tick next to. I've got 2 other examples which are current. One is a framework project in Scotland. We've got a number of projects called hub projects, where there's no PFI happening, but we as an FM contractor have just been procured prior to, detailed planning has just gone in for 2 new schools in Scotland, part of the Scottish Futures Trust hub frameworks. And for that project, we are invited to join the design process and development. It's not a PFI, but we will be given a long-term contract. We have to fix our price during the design stage. So from an FM point of view, in the FM industry, we are being motivated to join earlier and take part in that exercise to fix a price. It does leave is a sort of a leap of faith by the client in some respects, that they've got to procure an FM contractor very early. Now for this project, we're actually seeing the opportunity for a 25-year contract is so good that we will put no cost on that development exercise. If someone said to us it's a 2-year contract, which was, well, we're going to have to recover some cost from that. So for a 2020 contract, we'll recover it from the business overhead. And the third example is a speculative development just so happens to be in the city centre of Glasgow. I sound very parochial now, but honest, I get out of Scotland sometimes. But it just so happens to be in the city centre of Glasgow. Actually, two. One in London, the new Google headquarters in London. FM is involved with a design team. Again, virtually no cost. What we're saying is the value to us is in the opportunity of being embedded in the project. You know, we're hoping that will lead to us being selected as a contractor. Not actually in these cases for a very long time, possibly. One is a speculative development in Glasgow called Queen Street, and what's interesting there is the developer is very competitive, the property industry in Glasgow. It's a prime site, and the developer is very keen to secure the service charge. And for that purpose, they've said to us, here's the BIM drawing. It looks like the building's finished to all intents and purposes, although it's not actually out of the ground yet. But they're saying, price that. And that would be your fixed price for at least the first 12 months of operation. Now from that, the agent, Savills, have selected, or they've been able to calculate, also using sort of BIM energy management tools, various energy management tools. They've been able to very accurately, or more accurately than normal in the property industry, select or determine the service fee or service charge. And using that, they're trying to market the building. Now, for the developer, marketing that building is absolutely everything. You know, they're desperate to have that fully occupied before they put too many more bricks in the ground. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting point of view. Whether we actually secure the contract, still a degree of risk to that, but we're happy to collaborate and be involved. The third one at Google, we just any opportunity to be involved with Google sounds good. So we were keen to be involved there. Really, partly as a promotional thing, but again, there is a small element of cost recovery, but very, very small there. So it's possible, but you're absolutely right. There's still actually, in terms of procurement and responsibilities on client and contractor sides, there can be a divide.
Thanks very much. That's very interesting. So you've got an agent who's actively selling the energy efficiency of the building before the building's built to future clients. Again,
the advantage here is traditionally an FM contractor would say, I cannot possibly price this building that you haven't even put out the ground yet. But there is a BIM model, and it's virtually what you're seeing is the building. It's a phenomenal model with 3D Revit. So let's make it possible.
Yeah, the point being that could be done credibly. I mean, agents could do this off the top of their head, but if you've got a bit of science behind it, the client might be, the tenant might be a bit more persuaded by it. Yeah, that's very interesting. Sorry, you have a question there.
Thanks, John McGowan. Tom, I'd like to ask two questions just to get a couple of things fixed in my head. First, for Reid, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on precisely what you usefully can get by way of the equivalent of the old O&M manuals. In other words, how do you cull down the forest of BIM data to give you what is optimally most useful for you and also perhaps easier to keep up to date? And then, based on that, I would be interested in hearing from Kieran and Glenda. Do you ever see any opportunity, perhaps, that you could progressively build towards that level of data? And would there be any use for you in existing buildings? You already obviously have a lot of information. You obviously have BMS systems. Is there anything you see where you could actually digitize the original O&M manuals, or the equivalent of same?
Reid, perhaps first, and then we'll ask you.
Thank you for that. When we started out the process, we were kind of feeling our way, and we had this kind of concept that the first advantage of the BIM was to be able to harvest and it's quite a good word, harvest lots and lots of data into the CAFM system, which was our normal operating system. So we started off trying to take all kind of 100 bits of data about a door, for example, and transfer it over into the CAFM system. However, as our thoughts matured, we realised that actually, as long as we've got some reasonably high-level facts about the door or the boiler or the fan coil unit in the CAFM system, enough for us to plan maintenance and react to maintenance and maintain that basic asset log, that we could actually keep a lot of the more detailed information in the Revit, because we had come to our own conclusion that we were going to maintain that Revit database and the value of that database. So rather than transfer everything twice and duplicate it, which then you always have this danger that one of them gets out of sync with the other, we only have a reasonably small overlap of the key high-level individual asset data copied in the CAFM system for the purposes of basic maintenance, if you like, and normal FM tasks. But for the purpose of gathering or looking up more detailed data, we keep the data in Revit, just as though you would an O&M manual. So you maybe know about a fan coil unit in your CAFM system, and in the old days you go down to the boiler room and find out the commissioning data for the individual assets. Well, instead of going down to the boiler room and looking through 16 volumes of paper and finding it's missing, or covered in dust or whatever, completely out of date, it's on the glass, on the screen, available from Revit rather than shelf. Does that clear the point?
Just, how do you actually keep the diminutive set as a sub-function of the major data set in Revit? I mean, is there any linkage where changes in the Revit are automatically fed over?
Yeah, for sure. Every time you plug your BIM 360 field device in to recharge, it has the ability to update with any changes in the Revit model. So, for example, I had given the case where you can update. Effectively, you're not updating the Revit model, but you're pushing data and new information into the BIM world, sometimes using a handheld device. Now, you're not actually changing the Revit model, but you're uploading more data into the 360 field around it. So sometimes when you've got your device maybe down in particular parts of a building, in basements and things, you might lose some of your data connectivity. But the handheld device will still work, and it will still take those changes that you're programming, and when you next have a signal, it will send those up, or when you next go to plug it in, I forget what that's called, there's a word for it, but it's a synchronize, yeah, it'll synchronize with the Revit system, and it'll upload any more information it's got, and it will download any changes in the Revit model. As I said, if you come to do a refurbishment project, or you come to do something more major that requires the Revit model itself to be adjusted, then there's no doubt there's some cost to that. But it's, and I think people quite often are worried about that cost, but it's not a cost that you shouldn't have incurred anyway, because if you didn't have the Revit model, you would have to have gone away, off surveyed everything, still done a whole lot of drawings, and you should still have updated your building records. Now, maybe people don't always do that, or maybe they've got multiple versions of records, but it's not as though that's a new cost or a new obligation. It was there anyway.
Thanks, Reid. And Kieran, or maybe Kendra?
All right. So we generally spend a week on a customer site in first engagement, sifting through data, looking, and we generally don't go to the boiler room and page through these manuals, and mainly because, well, it's a health risk with the dust, and more often than not, it's just quicker to go around and have a look, take a sample, go to the chillers, have a look what's written on them, go to the boilers, take a sample on fan coil units, AHUs, and just do it that way, because that, at least you know it's real and it's not out-of-date information and that sort of thing. But we generally lose a week just trying to get our heads around what's there. And then if we use our own contractors in the implementation phase rather than a contractor that's familiar with the site, we'll also lose another week trying to understand the pipe runs and where they go, and there's a degree of risk there as well. So it would be hugely valuable, but it's up to the customer then to pay to put that in.
But to date, you don't. It is more, from your viewpoint, it's more cost effective for you to do it the way you presently do it, rather than to recommend that the existing as-builts are updated.
We haven't come across a customer who would have that level of information. Am I missing the point?
No.
No.
That's the point.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
thanks.
would be wonderful to find a customer with that. Yeah.
Okay, listen, thanks very much. That was interesting. Unless somebody has any pressing last question, I think we might move on.